Hello everyone, welcome to my channel The Faiza Edits. These sleeves were loose and scratchy inside. This is how I altered them into fitted, comfortable sleeves with clean slits. This is the sleeve laid flat, showing the embroidered georgette from the right side. Because of the embroidery and sequins, all adjustments need to be planned carefully. When turned inside out, you can see that both the lining and outer fabric are overlocked separately. Even though the stitching is neat, the embroidery and sequins can still feel itchy on the skin. I'm using another sleeve as a reference to decide how much fitting needs to be reduced. This helps maintain symmetry and avoid overfitting. Since this fabric is heavily embroidered, markings are not always clearly visible from the right side. So first, I'm showing the fitting measurements from the wrong side. I start by marking the sleeve opening width, which in this case is 4 inches. Next, I check the sleeve width near the armhole to make sure it won't become overfitted. From this point, I connect the sleeve opening to the bicep measurement where the sleeve will attach to the armhole. This helps draft the sleeve shape accurately. To this fitting line, I'm adding 1 inch extra for the French seam allowance. This can be reduced if you don't prefer extra fabric inside, but I like keeping it in case the sleeve needs to be loosened later. Now I carefully open the sleeve side seam using a seam ripper. I also undo about a 1/4 inch around the armhole where the sleeve meets the side seam. This gives full access to the sleeve while keeping it attached to the garment. With the seam opened, the sleeve can now be laid flat. The sleeve is fully accessible but not completely detached. Now I repeat the markings on the right side of the fabric. The earlier inside markings were only to explain the main idea. Here, I mark the actual fitting lines on the embroidered side. Again, I mark 1 inch away from the fitting line as seam allowance. I stop marking about 4 inches before the end to leave the slit opening. The seam will not end abruptly here. Instead, the stitching will stop about a 1/4 inch before this point and then slant towards the slit opening. This helps the slit turn neatly without bulk. For embroidered fabrics, pattern alignment is very important. I insert a pin from the front side exactly on the embroidery border. If the pin comes out on the same embroidery line on the other side, the pattern is perfectly aligned. This step helps avoid mismatched embroidery after stitching. Once aligned, I use pins to make sure there are no folds or uneven areas. I stitch along the 1 inch seam allowance, which is slightly looser than the final fitting. The stitching stops just before the slit opening. From this point, I slant the stitch line towards the slit opening. This stitch is back-tacked a few times to secure the stress point. Now I trim the excess fabric close to the stitched line. The extra fabric near the slit opening is also trimmed, leaving enough fabric to fold the slit neatly. The trimming continues all the way till the end of the sleeve. I now cut a small slit up to where the slanted stitching ends. The cut is made close to the stitches but without cutting into them. The corner created by the slanted stitch is also trimmed to help the fabric turn smoothly. The sleeve is now turned to the wrong side. Only the actual fitting remains visible. I pin the fabric again to keep everything stable while stitching. Now stitching along the final fitting line. At the slit starting point, which is a stressed area, I stitch a few extra stitches and back-tack for strength. This prevents tearing during wear. To finish the slit, the fabric is folded into a small triangle at the top. It is then folded once and folded again to enclose the raw edges. The same process is repeated on both sides of the slit for a clear and balanced finish. Finally, this part is all about finishing the slit cleanly and professionally. Since the fabric is folded into small triangle at the top of the slit, this help makes the neat and professional finish. It also helps create a strong, clean edge and prevents the slit from pulling or tearing while wearing. Take your time here, precise folding and slow stitching makes all the difference. When done right, the slit sits flat, opens beautifully, and looks finished from both inside and outside. Now that the sleeve alteration is complete, I'm attaching it back to the armhole. Only this small section was opened earlier just to give full access while working on the sleeve. I aligned the seam exactly where it was before and stitch it back securely. This keeps the original construction intact while allowing a clean alteration. A few careful stitches here are enough. There is no need to disturb the rest of the sleeve. This is how the sleeve looks from the inside when worn. There are no rough overlocked edges against the skin and the seam feels smooth and soft. That's the biggest difference this method makes: comfort without compromising structure. Here's a comparison between the original loose sleeve and the altered one. You can clearly see how the fitting is reduced while keeping the sleeve shape intact. The slit placement remained clean and intentional, not forced or distorted. From the outside, the sleeve still looks light and fluid. The embroidery stays aligned and the slit opens naturally when the arms moves. Nothing looks bulky or altered. It blends into the original design. Laid flat, you can see how neatly the seams are enclosed. Even with heavy embroidery and sequins, the inside finish stays clean and wearable. This is especially important for garments that are meant to be worn for long hours. This is a simple alteration, but the finishing makes all the difference. It's a practical solution for lined, embroidered sleeves that need both comfort and polish. Once you try this method, it's hard to go back to regular overlocked seams.